Hello, gentle viewers. This is Indian, welcoming you to a new episode of Out of the Park Baseball 2018, the series on tutorials. So in the last episode, and I know it was a long one, we talked a lot about statistics. Maybe so much your brain melted. If I made your brain melt, I apologize. Then again, if your brain melted, you probably can't hear this, but... Anyway, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about evaluating position players. And the knowledge that we learned in the previous episode about statistics will be a very critical part of how we identify which players are good, which players aren't so good, and how we can try to get better. So, let's pick one player and dive in to see all the different things that come into evaluating a given player. We're going to look at the roster. We're going to pick the best player I have, Bruce Campbell. Even if he doesn't have a boomstick. OOTP 18 gives you a lot of information in one screen. Some of the information is critical to understanding how players work. Other information is either purely cosmetic or is useful for other reasons. So we're going to break down each part of this and decide, okay, what do I need to pay attention to? What do I need to not pay attention to? So we have the baseball player's name here at the top. We have his uniform number. This is completely unimportant. You can change it if you want. Then we get position, RF, right field. Team, what hand he bats with. This is important. He's a left-handed bat. His age. Height and weight don't matter so much in OOTP 18. When I talk about pitchers next episode, I'll tell you one way I do use height and weight, but for the most part, it's not that important. And then salary. And then I think it was either 18 or 17 that introduced these little symbols which tell you that he's won certain awards, which is pretty cool. Okay. The age of a baseball player is one of the most important things you need to pay attention to, and this goes for both position players and pitchers. By the way, by position players, I mean people that aren't pitchers. This includes first base, second base, third base, shortstop, left field, center field, right field, and designated hitter. Although we aren't playing a version that has a designated hitter, it's still useful to know what it is. Okay. Age is one of the most important things to know. Because most players, not all, but most players age on a fairly typical curve. And this is especially true for position players. Most players improve until they hit their peak, and peak's usually age 27 to age 30, and then they start a gentle decline. Some players, especially if they get hurt, the decline is much more specific. But what this means is you always want as many young players as you can because they're more likely to improve. Hope that makes sense. It's a very important number, and it's one that people often forget. It's also important for contracts. But in the particular environment we're in right now, contracts don't matter a lot. Before 1972, baseball had something called the reserve clause, which meant every contract was a one-year contract, and the team could at any point release the player, and it was a non-guaranteed contract. So in modern-day pro football, which is the only sport that still has it, contracts are not guaranteed. It's based on how many games you play. If you don't play a game, you don't get paid. Different contracts have things like incentives and stuff, but that's the basics of how the contract works. So while Bruce Campbell's salary is $13,550, a lot of money in 1933, he won't earn that if he doesn't play. For our purposes, it makes no difference. But it does mean that we don't sign multi-year contracts. We have the ability to do so if we're so inclined, but because of the reserve clause, we can just renew his contract. Which means players only leave when we want them to leave or when they become considered free agents. Which I believe doesn't exist. It shouldn't anyway. I think it's under options. I didn't expect to talk much about contracts, but it's a good thing to talk about now. What's under financials? Or it should be here. Yeah, reserve clause, error rules. Okay, so it's not treated as truly non-guarantee. You have to pay 15% if they're cut. Guarantee contracts do go to there. Okay. So there is no free agency. The only reason a player would be released here is because of the way I have the game set up, which is basically, I believe I've given minor league control. No, actually I have control, so I don't know why these players are disappearing. I think it's just it doesn't automatically re-sign it. I mean, we have so much money, we have such a large budget that it really doesn't matter what we spend our money on. Okay. All this to say that in the reserve clause era, contracts don't matter. They just don't. You can decide what you want to do with the contract, but it doesn't really matter. So we were looking at Bruce Campbell. Let's go back to him. Service years, again, these matter very, very much for free agency purposes. For others, not so much. It's cool to see how you got the player. But again, morale does matter in Out of the Park Baseball 18. If you click on this tab here, you'll find out what contributes to it. So every player has a certain popularity level. If a player is popular and he leaves the team, the fans will be angry at you. If you import a popular player, the fans will be happy with you. This could result in whether you get fired or not and how much money you get. So it does matter. Players also perform better if their morale is high. Every player has, they have their opinion of the record, the transactions. If you bring in another popular player, they'll like it. In the future, I could see OOTP adding like personal relationships between players. Some players are friends, some players aren't, just like real life. Performance is how they do. Role on the team as if they're meeting their expected role. And then overall team chemistry. And we won't talk too much about that because it's a team thing. It's not really an individual player thing. And if a player has a role, it'll say it down here too. But this has a chemistry role. He'll say it down there too, but he doesn't. Status, this is how healthy he is right now. This is his injury proneness. He's durable, which means he's not likely to be injured. And this is how rested he is. And these are all things we don't use in really rating players, except for injury proneness. Do keep in mind that a great player who's hurt all the time is not a great player. I don't care if the guy hits a home run every at-bat when he's healthy, if he's only healthy for 20 games. Right, so that's all this basic biographical stuff. This is where the heart... This middle portion here is the heart of where you're going to make your decisions about who is and who is not valuable. There are many, many batting ratings in OOTP, but these are the core ratings. Contact is a player's ability to hit for average. The way I have the game set up, they're set on a scale from 20 to 80 in 5-point increments. It is possible to be over 80. It is actually possible to be under 20, but those won't be shown here. You can change settings in the game to make it based on a 1 to 100 scale, which I highly recommend if you're learning the game, because it'll give you a better idea of how players actually differ. Because the ratings gaps are fairly small, it means that lots of players could look very similar who actually aren't similar. Make sense? I hope so. The second one is gap power. Gap power is a player's ability to hit for power, but not necessarily home runs. So this usually translates into doubles and sometimes triples. Home run power should be self-explanatory, I hope. Discipline is the player's ability to take walks. Avoid Ks is their ability to not strike out. These 5 numbers, the first one is current, the second number is potential. Bruce Campbell, even at the age of 23, has already reached his full potential. In fact, the AI expects him to decline. So this is a total overall number. He's an 80. He's basically a superstar. 55 means he'll decline to being a really good player. Bruce Campbell is going to be around for a long time to come. But ratings aren't everything. Let's find another player for a second here, because you can't see any gap between current and potential because he's already reached his potential. Let's look at Larry French. He's still got some improvement to do. Oh, he's a pitcher. I don't really want to talk about pitchers yet. Come on, I gotta have one position player who's not at his potential yet. Sort by potential. It's probably the easiest way to find someone. Johnny Dickshot, I guess. So here you'll notice the game expects he could get better at hitting home runs. The colors are color-coded to tell you whether something is kind of bad, orange, yellow, average, green, good, blue is really good, red is really bad. Just another way to find out. So the game thinks he'll get a little bit better hitting home runs. That accounts for the difference between overall and potential. Different seasons, different things will matter more. And that's something that's so hard-coded into the game, I can't tell you how to find that out. You just kind of have to get a gut feeling for that. This kind of player will always play well, but he plays especially well in the minors. Overall also includes defense, but we'll get back to that in a minute. Hitter type. Let me refresh my memory about the difference between hitter type and batted ball profile. Okay. That's a pitcher. I think, okay. That's what the difference is. Okay. Every hitter in Major League Baseball tends to have a tendency. At least most of them. I shouldn't say every. Most of them do. Some batters pull the ball, which means they hit it to... If you're a lefty, you hit it to right field. If you're a righty, you hit it to left field. It's the natural tendency of the ball. Because of the way you swing the ball, you swing the bat, you hit the ball to the correct field. Some hitters are considered spray hitters. Spray hitters can hit the ball pretty much to the opposite field. We also call them the opposite field hitters, but for OOTP purposes, spray hitters hit to the opposite field. So this means righties hit to left field, lefties hit to right field. If it sounds confusing, remember left and right field are based upon the pitcher's perspective, not the hitter's. And then some hitters are considered normal, meaning they hit to the opposite field or to the normal field about equally well. There's also the batted ball profile. What happens when a hitter tends to hit a ball? Line drive hitters will hit the ball very hard, but on a straight line. Ground ball hitters will tend to hit the ball into the ground. I don't know if there's any other options. I think it's just the three, but there might be what about a George McQuinn? He's spray and normal. Cesar's normal and high drive. Normal and ground ball. Pull hitter and normal. I think it's only the three states. I don't think you can have a batted ball profile other than those three. So you're either line drive hitter, ground ball hitter, or batted, or just normal. This can matter a lot for parks. So let's take a very quick look at the baseball park of the St. Louis Browns. We have a ballpark that's pretty normally sized. We've got a very deep center field. 450 feet is actually pretty deep. But the rest of the park is pretty much average. Our park plays very well to hitters. Park factors are based on a number from 0 to 1 to basically 0 to 1, but you can go over 1. This means our park is very friendly to hitters unless they're hitting doubles or triples. There are other parks like you do have the Polo Grounds. The Polo Grounds have a very short left field line, a very short right field line, and then a cavernous center field. So every park is different. Because you play half your games at your home ballpark, you typically want to pick players that fit well in your home ballpark. Our park doesn't have an extreme factor. But if you're playing, say, the New York Giants, you might want to focus more on pull hitters or opposite field hitters. You don't want someone that hits toward the center of the field because they're more likely to get an out. I hope that makes sense. It's not going to be a huge difference, but it can depending on the ballpark. And again, the Polo Grounds are an extreme example. And they're technically illegal. There's a reason why the Polo Grounds were never rebuilt. Because by Major League standards, they're illegal. Because you have to have your right field and left field lines have to be farther out than that. I think at least 300 feet. Okay. Speed is the player's raw speed. This fits into defense and it fits into offense. It's how fast the player is. Stealing is how good the player is at stealing bases. You'll notice it is not the same as speed. You can be very fast and bad at stealing bases. You can be very slow and good at stealing bases. This is basically the player's ability to identify, aha, this pitcher is behaving a certain way when he's throwing to the bag. If I pay attention to that, I can steal more effectively. Think of it that way. Finally, base running is kind of a catch-all stat that does include stealing, but also the player's ability to take an extra base on a hit. Okay. Sacrifice bunt is how likely he is to bunt the ball foul when he bunts, or bunt it correctly. Bunt for it is how likely he is to get a hit when he bunts. Bunting is stupid. You shouldn't be bunting. We're not going to talk about bunting. That's not important. Now, all of these ratings can get better or get worse as time progresses. We click on the development screen. We'll see he gets better at defense. His speed drops a little bit. Most players will get slower as they get older. And we can see other things changing here as well. Okay. Also, the overall rating will change too. Like his potential rating actually just increased to 60. But it doesn't show it here yet because he hasn't been scouted again since. Okay. Here's a very important part of this. These stats here will almost never change. And they're different for outfielders and infielders. I'll show you an infielder here in a second. Outfielders have range, error, and arm. Range is how well they get to balls. Error is how likely it is to mess up. Arm is how strong their arm is. These are based on how good they played the position and how long they've played at a position. Baseball players can learn new positions, especially if the new position is easier than the one they played before. And baseball has something called the defensive spectrum. You go from... It starts at catcher, because catcher is the hardest defensive job. It goes catcher, shortstop, second base, third base, although there's some dispute about which of those two is more difficult. Center field, first base, left field, right field, or maybe it's right field, left field. I don't remember the specific defensive spectrum. First base might actually be at the end, actually. Yeah, first base is actually the worst. Playing the outfield is harder than playing first base. And the more difficult the position, the harder it is to learn. But Bruce Campbell might, if you watch a previous series, began his life as a center field. He's actually learned these other positions, and now he's gotten really good at right field because he was a pretty good center fielder. He's even better because the position is easier. Defense is very, very important. For many players, it's going to be a trade-off. You can have a great hitter or a great defender, but you're rarely going to get both. Bruce Campbell is an exception. But for most players, you think about the position. I would rather have a great defensive shortstop than a great offensive shortstop if I don't have the choice to pick someone who's good at both. Because a player who's bad at shortstop will cost your team more runs than he saves with his bat. Conversely, you generally want a first baseman that's better at offense than defense, because a first baseman who screws up is not likely to screw up as big. Okay, these are just the ratings. You also need to consider the statistical history, and I really like this little stat line here. We've got the game log here, and you can change some splits here if you want. I didn't know you could do that. That's so cool. We'll talk about handedness here in just a couple of seconds, because it matters a lot. This screen here tells you the team they played at the league level, and then a lot of the basic stats we've already talked about, including RBI, which don't matter. This is a great catch-all screen of how a player is doing over time. Batting average is very, very, very fungible, which means it changes a lot from year to year. Very fungible. You can see that here with Campbell. 379, 329, 360, 318. It goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's really, really fungible. On-base percentage is less fungible. Slugging percentage is even less fungible, although triples are part of it, and triples are based on luck. Keep in mind, too, the level they're playing at. He's at Double-A. This is a fantastic season for Double-A. He would not have hit that well if he was in the majors, almost certainly. Okay. Here you can see an OPS over 1. This is, again, why it's not truly a percentage. We just call it that. Here, OPS plus. This is where you look for trends. What is the player doing well? What is the player not doing so well? What do you expect to continue? And he's been pretty consistent overall with a couple of very important things. First, he plays lots of games and rarely gets hurt. I cannot stress how important health is when you're evaluating players. I know I've already talked about it, but it's, again, really important. You want to look at, roughly speaking, if numbers trend up, trend down, and maybe look at why they trend down. If you'll notice, 1931 and 1933 have a very big difference. Offensively, he was about the same player. So why was he so much better in 1933? It's going to come down to fielding. We look at career fielding stats. He was a below-average right fielder in 1931. He was amazing in 1933. To tell you the difference is almost entirely defense. Remember, he came up as a center fielder. If we look at all levels combined, we'll see that he was a pretty good center fielder at one point, but he had to learn the position. 31, he didn't know the position very well, but he learned it in 32, and he mastered it in 33. So this tells you his offense is actually quite consistent. If anything, the outlier here is 1932. We should not expect him to hit 360 every season. He had a lot more doubles than usual that year. He had a lot more home runs. He had a lot more hits. This season is not what we should expect. This season is, because it's close to the other stats. So looking at all this, I can tell that Bruce Campbell's a really freaking good player. But you probably already knew that from the statistics episode. How do we evaluate players that are much more marginal? We need to look at other things that matter in a player, and one of these is handedness. Hitters hit better against pitchers who use the opposite hand because it's easier to see the baseball. Left-handed hitters hit right-handed pitchers better. Right-handed hitters hit left-handed pitchers better. Now, different players actually kind of break the rules. Some hitters are really good at both. Some hitters are only good at one or the other. But usually that's how hitters tend to hit, which means left-handed hitters are generally more valuable because there's far more right-handed pitchers than there are left-handed. So we need to break down the marginal players to see if they still have value. So let's find a player I consider much more marginal. Let's look at Jim Maslow. This is a player that clearly looks like he should not be on the team because he doesn't hit very well. We need to break this down a little bit and see what value he provides, if any. His statistics aren't great. He's never stuck in the majors for very long. Even in the minors, he didn't hit super well. A bonus point for player evaluation is knowing which levels are harder than which, and which leagues are harder than which. Not all AAA leagues are the same. Not all AA leagues are the same. I don't know 1920s and 30s minor leagues that well. I'll admit it. In the modern majors, the Pacific Coast League is a hitter's league. It's not a pitcher's league. So pitchers that do well in the PCL are generally really good. Hitters that do well in the PCL, it might just be the park. It might just be it's a small park and the air is really, really thin, so the ball travels very, very quickly. So let's break down the component ratings. And now you begin to see how players can be more useful. This hitter cannot handle left-handed pitching at all, but he's okay against right-handed pitching. We could also turn into a pitcher later on if we wanted to, but this bottom part isn't as important. Here are the other defensive ratings, which tell you if a player might be able to learn another position well. Catcher ability is the catcher's ability to do catcher things that do not involve throwing out pitchers, or base runners. I know that's a very generic stat, it's how it is. Framing would be considered in this if OOTP 18 considers it, which I don't think it does. Catcher arm is the ability to throw out base runners. Infielders get range, error, arm, and turning the double play. Bird talked about the first three. Turning the double play is the ability to not be knocked over when the base runner is sliding, and to make sure you make a smooth transition. Turning double plays is really important for second base and shortstop, not so important for first base or third base. We can see here he could maybe learn first base, but we're probably better off keeping in the outfielders. He has some value. He can steal bases, and he's a little bit okay against right-handed pitching. He's especially good at drawing walks. But at the end of the day, Jim Maslow is not the kind of player that will win us or lose us a lot of games. He's just kind of there. He's there to be a backup. He's there to provide a little bit of play discipline off the bench. That's the basic nuts and bolts of how you evaluate players. It becomes more difficult when there are two players with the exact same overall or potential score. For this, we use a lovely feature called the compare feature. You can only compare two players at a time. This gives you a lovely look at how players deal with. Why is George Cesar considered the same as Freddie Lindstrom? Well, George Cesar is a much better hitter, but it also looks like he's way past his prime. He is 40. We should not be expecting him to play very well. He's got a lot of potential, but that's because players don't lose potential as quickly as they lose actual ability. We can see he has trouble against left-handed pitching now, but we can see he's still really, really fast, which is good. On the other hand, Freddie Lindstrom is a worse hitter, but better at bunting. It's probably going to come down to defensive ratings, I bet. And here we clearly see George Cesar as an awful first baseman, and Freddie Lindstrom is a pretty great second, third, or first baseman. And so this is why they're rated the same. The way we have it set, and I'm going to need to double check my settings here. It's under options. No, it's not. It's under not global settings. Yes, it is. Here it is here. All players, this is, but right now we have ratings based on positions. What does that mean? This means that Woody English at a 70 overall is a really fantastic shortstop. He's one of the very best shortstops in the league. But that doesn't mean he's one of the best hitters in the league. It means he's one of the best hitters at shortstop. It could be a really bad year for shortstops. It probably isn't, but it could be. So 20 out of 20 doesn't mean a player isn't useful if a player has 20 overall and 20 potential. It just means you have to find what the value is. And here, it's defense. He plays second and short pretty well and first base really well. And he hits enough that he's not a super huge embarrassment off the bench. Most years. Some years he is. We can see that here. He is here to play defense and to be a backup, and that has value. And he's also a pretty decent base stealer. He hasn't been for a while, but it looks like in the past he was much more active. And he is 34. This player has a role on this team. It doesn't mean there's not a player who might be better, but it does mean he's got a niche. And it's really important to know which niches every team needs. You obviously want the best stars you can get every position. But you want players who can play multiple infield positions. I cannot stress that enough. It adds so much more ability to your ability to decide, I can tell you to play multiple positions. It means you don't have to carry as many position players if you can also carry pitchers. Max Bishop is a one-trick pony at this point. He can only really play second. He would actually be a pretty decent first baseman, but we got first base filled. He's only going to be starting. I'm not going to be able to use him as a utility player, except maybe at first. That might be his future. His future might be George Cesar retires and Max Bishop shifts over to first so he can play Freddie Lindstrom at second. You have to keep all these things in mind when you're deciding things. You need to weigh offense versus defense. And most importantly, you have to look at your minors. You have to know who's coming and who you don't want to be blocked. Johnny Dickshot, who we looked at a little bit earlier and has a hilarious name that always makes me giggle because apparently I'm 12 years old, is a decent hitter and a decent fielder. He is not the kind of player that's really going to excite you for anything except for his base stealing. This is not the kind of player we worry about blocking. He's not going to change the way we play the game if we have him or don't have him. Oh, you could also be a fly ball hitter. I lied. That makes sense. He's not bad. He's not good. You can see he's actually pretty pissed about his role on his team because built-in role on team is where he expects to be playing. He thinks he should be in the major leagues, and he probably should be. I would trade him, but I don't know what we'd get for him. And this is actually a nice, good overview, too, and we'll talk about that more later on. For the purposes of our game, you see the word ball player in a first name. This is a randomly generated player that probably won't be very good. But you need to look at what you've got and what's coming in your system to make an evaluation decision. Based on this, I could probably get rid of Jim Mosloff and call up Johnny Dickshot. And I might do that. I haven't decided yet. I'm not going to make any changes now during the tutorial series. But it's important to know, okay, this is what's coming in my minors. I need to make sure there's a spot for them to play. Third base, I'm kind of set at right now. So a player like Bobby Reese is less valuable to me, which means I might want to trade him. He's also a really bad hitter. He's got to be an amazing defensive player. Oh, he's really good at stealing bases. 67, my word. And he's good at hitting home runs, and home run hitting is always overvalued in Major League Baseball. I hope this episode has made sense so far about how you evaluate which players to pick and which ones to pass on. There's so many other things to consider that this is not a hard and fast list. And know that you're going to get players wrong. You're going to look at a player with really high potential and assume he's going to work out, and he won't. Perfect. Almost completely finished the episode exactly on time. Conversely, you're also going to look at a player that doesn't look like he's going to work out. You're going to trade him, and it turns out, I really wish I had him. He was so amazing, I feel very stupid for trading him. This is going to happen. The most important things to consider when evaluating players are, 1, what does your team need? And 2, what is in the minor leagues? You don't want to spend a lot of money on a position player if you've got someone who might be as good or better in the minor leagues. I know that sounds super obvious, right? But it happens so often in the real major leagues. People are like, oh, this player is good. I'll never get a better player. I'm going to sign to a lot of money. Oh, hey, look, we made a mistake. The other reason to know how to evaluate players is to trade. So you know who to trade for. But the reason I'm focusing a little bit now on not making you too worried is that you're going to get it wrong. Baseball players are human beings. Some people have good days, some people have bad days. OOTP 18 also includes manager relationships. Certain players will play better with certain managers. And this happens a lot in real life. So you need to consider that just because you spent a lot of money on a player and he didn't work out, or a high draft pick, doesn't mean that you will make a better decision later on. Woody Jensen we acquired in a trade. This is going to be the last thing we'll talk about, just to show you why evaluating players may or may not be a big deal. Woody Jensen has not really worked out for us. I wanted a really great defensive outfielder, and he's been that, but he just can't hit. He cannot hit to save his life. 48%. The average Major League Baseball player was 52% better than him. That's so bad. So even though he's an amazing defensive outfielder, and so I'm keeping him on the team, he can't hit that well. But we need to see what we gave up for him. So you scroll down. It's going to take a while to get there because I got a lot of stuff in here. Here we go. I gave up 3 players. A catcher, Merv Shea, who's pretty bad. He's in the minor leagues. Earl Clark, who's had a decent career, but has never reached his potential. And a pitcher that's kind of just there. So we can call this a win in our book. Even though Woody Jensen hasn't been all we hoped he would be. He's still a very good defensive center fielder, even if he can't hit. And center field is one of those positions where it's not unreasonable to trade defense for offense. Because it's really important your center fielders are good. Because, looking at a baseball diamond, center field is a position that has to cover the most ground. Same thing for shortstop. Shortstop's got a lot of ground to cover. It looks like it should be roughly equal, but the difference is third baseman and first baseman almost never move. They move a little bit, but not a lot. Second basemen tend to stay either on second base or to the right of second base. They hardly ever go to the left. That's a shortstop's job. And a third baseman very rarely moves off of third, so there's a big gap for the shortstop to fill. Also keeping in mind the vast majority of baseball players hit with their right hand, and most of them either are normal or pull hitters. They're going to hit toward the shortstop most of the time. So it's important to have a really good shortstop. Make trade-offs for defense intelligently. Because some players are so bad defensively that no amount of offense will help you regardless of where they play. George Cesar is probably honestly at that point. You can see he was almost a league average hitter, and he was so bad at first base he was actually worse than your random minor leaguer. George Cesar is aged, by the way, incredibly well. He's 40 years old. He has a major league career of... God, how many seasons is that? 1915 to 1933, not counting the minors. He's been in the majors for 18 years. And he's still a 50 overall because he's still a very, very good contact hitter. But we might need to think about moving on from George Cesar in some way. There's a popularity concern, but he's so bad at first base, he's actually making the team worse. Let's see, how bad was he at first base? He cost us nearly 2 wins at first base. If he was a designated hitter and played no position, his WAR would probably be about a win and a half higher, which is about where it was in 1930. He can't handle the field anymore. In real life, in the American League, it's something called the designated hitter. And all that person does is hit. They don't play the field. We don't have that luxury now. So we have a very difficult decision to make, and I'll talk a lot about that, I'm sure, when we start playing the game again for real with George Cesar. Because he's so bad at defense. So bad. Ugh. Okay. I hope that helped a little bit. One other thing I want to mention. I know this one's running a little over, but we weren't over by as much. For a backup catcher, virtually the only thing that matters is defense. Catching is so hard. It is by far the hardest defensive position because you have to be able to work with pitchers. You're involved in a lot of plays, and you generally, you can't athletics your way out of a bad decision. If a shortstop breaks the wrong way, but he's really fast, he can adjust to that. Catchers can't. I have had 20, overall 20, potential 20 players as backup catchers for 10 years because they're so good defensively. It literally does not matter how good a backup catcher hits because he's only going to be playing in 20 to 30 games. If your starter gets hurt, you want to make sure you've got an actual good catcher. But if you're going to go on the cheap anywhere, backup catcher is a place to do it. Okay. I hope you found this episode useful. Again, my techniques don't work for everyone. And it's hard to talk about player acquisition. I think we might focus on that in the first proper episode so I can talk a little more about how I decide which players to pick and which ones I don't. This is just tell you, this player is good, this player fits on my team, I like to keep him. Or this player doesn't fit so well, maybe I should get rid of him. I.e. Jim Mosloff. Or Mosov. Whatever. But that is it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, a subscription might be nice. Comment down below if you have questions about specific decisions, about things you need to consider, things you don't need to consider. Share your own tips if you're an OOTP veteran and there's certain things you'd like to watch for. I'm sure other people would find it useful. I could find it useful too. I am by no means perfect at the game. And of course, like the video. And tell your friends. Tell your friends if you want to learn Out of the Park Baseball 18, watch this series and you'll learn how to play it. Until next time, this has been Avindian, and I bid you good day.